Uh, in my opinion, it appears that the Israeli government and the Israeli security agencies actually nowadays are standing shocked regarding the surprising performance of the Palestinian resistance in the West Bank. As you know, that the Palestinian resistance group the Palestinian resistance groups in the West Bank have succeeded to drag the Israeli occupation forces to a well-executed ambush in Jenin camp a couple of days before, and then the Palestinian resistance fighters actually carried out a strong resistance operation against the Israeli settlers in the West Bank. This reveals clearly that the Palestinian resistance is developing remarkably and significantly, and the Israeli occupation forces and the Israeli occupation security agencies began to realize that they have nothing to do with the escalating and the sore Palestinian resistance in the West Bank. And it reveals that there is some kind of a fiasco situation for the Israeli occupation forces in the West Bank. This indicates clearly that we are in front of a new stage of the relationship regarding or between the Palestinian resistance faction and the Israeli occupation forces, and the way the Palestinian resistance factions would react and respond to the aggressions and attacks practiced and waged by the Israeli occupation forces against the Palestinian people. Generally, or all in all, we can say that long gone are those days when the Israeli occupation forces used to invade or to raid any Palestinian city or Palestinian village in the West Bank without having or without paying a high price or without being faced with a relentless Palestinian resistance from the Palestinian side.
Let's cross over to Mr. Ruhollah Rezvi in Qom. Give us your perspective on the recent uptick of Israeli violence against Palestinians, and if you may also talk to us about the response that we're seeing from the Palestinian resistance. Many are saying that the increase of Israeli violence is actually bringing Palestinian factions and Palestinian resistance groups even more united together, binding them even more than before.
Yeah, one terminology has been being repeated again and again in recent years, and specifically in recent months, which is in Arabic, وحدة الساحات, which means the unity of the grounds. The point is that, as it was mentioned by dear guests from Gaza, that once there was no reaction from the Palestinians in West Bank, whenever the Israelis were deciding to infiltrate, enter, arrest, kill, they were not facing such a sort of significant reaction or the resistance from the Palestinians in West Bank. But things have changed dramatically. If I want to mention a certain time, I should figure out and I should talk about Arin al-Asud, the lion's den. From February 20, 2022, we are facing a new phase in the Palestinian resistance in West Bank. As it was mentioned, the recent ambush of the Palestinian groups and their resistance in different cities was really remarkable, and this, of course, shocked the Israelis. It recalls me the situation of Gaza. Once Gaza was, stripped, that Israelis, whenever they were deciding, they were entering, they were kidnapping, they were killing, they had a free hand to do whatever they want. But if you look at the situation of Gaza from 2006 till now, 2023, things have been changing dramatically. And the same point and the same change is taking place about the Palestinians in West Bank. We are observing a remarkable, if you consider how the Palestinian groups and the Palestinian resistance forces are under pressure from the Palestinian authorities from one side and all the Israeli agencies from the other side, you will understand how difficult their operations are. But in spite of that, we observed an outstanding resistance from the Palestinian groups, and it shows the same path that the Gaza has crossed during these years. Palestinians in West Bank are also following the same path, which is the path of resistance, I believe.
And back to our guest in Gaza City, Mr. Abu Musab. But let's talk about the lack of a response by the international community. We've been seeing these crimes by the Israelis, which have escalated from the start of this year, basically taking place on a day-to-day basis, but still no reaction, no response. In some states, in some incidents, just mere condemnations, but they're staying at the stage of being platitudes. There's no tangible action from the international community. How do you explain that, and how do you view the inconsistency of bodies like the United Nations when it comes to Israeli crimes?
Yes, the least thing we can say about this situation is that it's a disgrace for the international community and the human rights organizations actually to stand in full silence in front of this soaring and this increasing and escalating Israeli terrorism practice left, right, and center day and night against the Palestinian civilians in the West Bank. And actually the scenes of the attacks practiced and waged by the Israeli thugs, the thugs of the Israeli colonial settlers in the West Bank when they attack the Palestinian civilians and the Palestinian neighborhoods and setting the properties, their houses and their cars on fire. This is the embodiment of the Israeli terrorism, and this is at least should push those international organizations, human rights organizations, and the international community to stand up for their responsibilities. It should never be acceptable for them to stand in silence watching this kind of a practice and this kind of systematic terrorism targeting the Palestinian civilians and the Palestinian children who are sitting peacefully in their houses attacked by the Israeli settlers without any guilt, without any cause. This indicates clearly that we are in front of a wide-scale Israeli terrorism practiced by the Israeli settlers, protected by the Israeli government, which means that the Israeli army and the Israeli occupation forces, actually, they are accomplices to those attacks. And if they really are concerned about stopping those crimes and those attacks, they would stop them. But generally, they are on the same boat with the Israeli settlers, and they are satisfied with those attacks against the Palestinian civilians. So this means that the Palestinian people nowadays, as I have mentioned repeatedly, that the Palestinian people actually are standing on a serious crossroad regarding the escalating terrorism and the escalating attacks and aggressions targeting the Palestinian civilians across all Palestinian territories without having any response from the international or on the international arena. If the human rights organizations and the international community actually haven't or didn't have any kind of a response or a serious response nowadays in front of all these developments or these attacks against the Palestinian people, then when will they have any kind of a serious step in this regard? I think this should call on all international organizations, all free people worldwide to have a decisive stance in this regard, just to have a serious step in this regard to stop or to raise the voice regarding the Israeli, or to unmask the reality of the Israeli occupation, or to speak up on behalf of the Palestinian people, or to protect the Palestinian people at least.
Sarvos Rula Rezvi, let's talk about the Palestinian response and retaliations that we've been seeing against the Israeli occupation. How significant and how important are these Palestinian operations against the Israelis? The Palestinian resistance has on many occasions lauded them as being heroic operations.
Yeah, indeed. As I mentioned, first of all, what we observe in West Bank is the unification of different fractions, different Palestinian groups are operating all together. In a couple of days before, we had martyrs from Hamas, we had martyrs from Jihad, we had martyrs from all other, Palestinian resistance groups. So the point, the characteristic of the Lions Den or Anir al-Sud is that they have one single banner, one single flag. They are from different fractions, but they are operating all together, and this has proved their power. As I mentioned, we had like the Israeli Apache helicopter that was targeted by the Palestinians. We had the Palestinians, the ambush that they had against the infiltration of the units of the Israeli occupation forces who entered there. So the power and the increased power of resistance is really something clear. Let me point to one important statement of Ayatollah Khamenei in 2014 when he discussed about arming the West Bank. We should not forget that resistance is the legitimate right of the Palestinian people. Resistance in all Palestine. Forget about 1967 borders or 1948 borders. All the Palestinian land is an area where the Palestinians are free to react and resist, and it's their legitimate right. But it is also a duty upon the shoulders of others who are not in Palestine to help the Palestinians. No one better than Palestinians knows how to fight and how to resist, and they have done miracles out of nothing. But let's not forget that there is a duty upon all free men, free nations, free government of world who are not deceived by the slogans of human rights and these stuffs when it comes to the Palestinian cause and the Israeli cause, and they should fulfill their duty in helping their brothers, in helping them in completing, in fulfilling their resistance against the occupation forces. And this is something really important. We should not be ashamed of talking about resistance, talking about arming resistance, which is a duty upon all the countries, all the nations, and all the people across the globe. And till now, Palestinians have done it with very limited resources, very limited access to any sort of equipments that they may protect themselves. Again, let's not forget the events that we are facing in these days is taking place in West Bank, it's taking place in Nablus, it's taking place in Jenin. These are those areas who were supposed to be under the control of the Palestinians based in 1967 borders. Even those areas are now being, again, targeted by the occupation forces of Israel. And I do believe that Palestinians will be successful, but let's not forget about the duty of other countries, other people, other nations towards the Palestinians and towards their resistance.
All right, thanks a lot, gentlemen. Sabra Rezvi, activist and political analyst, joining us from Rome. And thanks to Palestinian political activist Moti Abu Musab, joining us from Gaza.